You can have speak.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Bonet from Schooner Cove, and I'd like to introduce Betty Hewson, and she is 89 years old, lives here at Schooner Cove.
Great.
In 1933, at the height of the Depression, the unemployment rate was 25%, and I was 6 years old, too young to realize the hardships surrounding me. I lived in Belmont, Massachusetts, in a neighborhood of small homes and young families and many children. Life was good. I do recall conversations about job losses and newspaper pictures of bread lines and sad stories of bank failures and families losing money. My father worked for the public utilities, so he still had his job. And so everything was quite okay in my life. As the Depression went on in the 30s, my brother and I were very aware of the lessons of frugality and thriftiness in our family life. We knew not to ask for extras. Our toys were simple, not costly. Hopscotch and jump ropes on the sidewalks, marbles played in the dirt driveways, jacks and kick the can and hide and seek, and dodgeball, and of course, books to read. I do recall this man who sharpened kitchen knives, doing the best he could to earn a living during the Depression. He came down our street every now and then, jangling his bells to alert the customers, and my mother would go to the door to beckon him to come in to sharpen our knives and scissors. I remember hearing that he finally had saved enough money to buy a store in Arlington, and he further went on to be the official skate sharpener for the Boston Bruins.
Oh.
And so his hard work and resilience really paid off for him. Did I learn any lessons from the 30s? I still faithfully clip coupons and proudly present them to Hanover's cashiers. My husband and I always paid cash for purchases, including our automobiles. We were good savers and had enough to save to pay for the important things like children's education. So the Depression did influence our values and habits, as well as did some Scottish genes on both sides of our families. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
This is Lee Farley.
Okay, go ahead, Lee.
Okay, I'm 93 years old and remember vividly the Depression. But I remember some of the happy times that children always seem to be able to get into. And one of the very happy things that happened to children was if they had a quarter, you could go to the movie and you could bring somebody with you. And that is amazing when I stop to think of how expensive the movies are today. It would be 15 cents for me, 10 cents for my brother, and my mother would give us a nickel to get a Hershey bar while we were in the movie. And the movies that we were able to see were wonderful. Walt Disney, Charlie Chan, Tarzan, and wonderful, wonderful movies. And that was a time that all of us, or those of us who were in the movies, forgot about the terrors and the horrors of the Depression.
Wonderful. Thank you.
This is Alice McAdams, and she is 93.
I was born and brought up in Baltimore, Maryland, and I had a very happy suburban life until I was 10 years old. We lived in my mother and father had built a lovely brick house in the suburbs of Baltimore, and we were out on the street along with everyone else, having a fine time. My grandmother took us to Maine, took me and my first cousin, who was the same age, took us to Maine the day school let out and didn't take us back to Baltimore till the day school started. And that's where my love of Maine comes in. And my father was a banker, and he was very affected by the Depression, to the point of putting his own money into the bank and into the stock market, trying to shore everything up. But of course he couldn't do that much. And so in 1934, which was well along, they were having a dinner party. Their 3 children were in bed in the new house they had built, brick house, and he suddenly got sick, and he excused himself from the table and went up and talked to his 7-year-old son about maybe he'd have to take over the caring of the family, because my father, I think, already knew that something terrible was happening to him. And he went to bed, and eventually they discovered it was his heart, and his heart killed him at age 49 in 1934. And even when I went to college in 1942, so many of people had the same kind of experiences, that we talked about what had happened to us in the Depression. My mother tried to keep the new house going, even took roomers, but she couldn't do it. And we all had to move in with my maternal grandmother. So we moved into downtown Baltimore, but Mother felt that education was very important, and she managed to get scholarships for all of us at Calvert School and Bryn Mawr School, and I had a really wonderful childhood despite the Depression.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you.
We're ready.
Okay. I didn't grow up during the Depression, though I may look it. Years ago, I worked with a fellow who did grow up in North Carolina back in the 30s. He was a sharecropper's son. He was one of 14 children. And there were 7 boys and 7 girls. And the only meat they ever had was squirrel meat. And they had a rifle, but they couldn't afford ammunition. So each of the 7 boys was trained to use a slingshot. And they became so proficient that they would shoot a squirrel every day or 2, and that would serve as their meat source. Well, the story the fellow told was pretty funny, because he was the youngest boy, so by the time he got to use a slingshot, they'd been killing squirrels for like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And they had so decimated the population, he had to walk over 5 miles to find a squirrel. Anyway.
Here we go.
And while I'm rolling here, my mother, someone earlier was talking about some of the good things about the Depression, and there obviously were not a lot of good things, but there were some. My mother, my grandfather was gassed during World War I, and he died afterwards, so that my mother and my grandmother had to move in with my great-grandfather, who was a farmer, and a very successful farmer. So during the depths of the Depression, many of the relatives in that area, South New Jersey, actually came to live at the farm. And so at some points there were anywhere from 12 to 20 people living there. And the thing that my mother liked about it was that was the year of board games. So every night there'd always be enough people that they could have multiple board games. And she could skip around from table to table and play to her heart's content. And I'll tell the Mr. K story. Last one. When I was a boy, we used to go to our family plot in South Jersey, and there was a grave there for a man named Mr. K, Frank K. And I didn't understand what the relationship with our family was. And finally, when I was about 10, my mother explained it. Mr. K, I think, had been a stockbroker in Philadelphia, and he had lost his job in the early 30s, and he came out to live with my great aunt and uncle in New Jersey. But he only had enough money to pay for a couple of years, room and board. And so anyway, you know, things were so much different then. They kept him on until he died, probably 12 or 15 years later. He never paid him a cent for anything, and he was even buried in the family plot.
Yeah, it's a nice story.
Mr. K. Thank you, Bob.